My family sued me to give my house to my golden child brother. Later, they kidnapped my wife, claiming they were saving her from me. I've been harboring this grudge for years, and I'm not sure if I'm seeking guidance or if I simply need to vent. It's difficult to describe, but I suppose I've always known that my family didn't really love me, not in the manner that I should have been. My brother, Ethan, is 17 years old, and I'm the oldest sister, 24M. 7 years is a great enough distance for us to never truly get along. To be honest, I believe that things began to go south as soon as he was born. I could tell, as a child, that he was the center of my parents' universe. I was just there, and he was their golden child. The more I think back on it, the more I see how messed up everything was, even if I used to think maybe I was just being dramatic or hallucinating things. For instance, Ethan received a brand new PS5 with everything he could possibly want for Christmas last year. Me? I received socks. Walmart basic white socks. No joke. Even the socks themselves don't matter to me. I could live without them. The thing that bothers me, though, is that it was the only present I received. As Ethan devoured his presents like a ferocious animal, everyone was gathered around, grinning and laughing. The enthusiasm in the house was all for him. Then there was me, with a little packet of socks in my hand and a phony smile on my face, as I was totally disregarded by everyone. What's crazy is that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was how my entire life was. My birthdays? Don't think about it. My family didn't even recognize my birthday until I was about 10 years old. They either forgot or stopped caring after that. My parents didn't even say happy birthday, so I celebrated my last birthday with college pals. Nothing, no text, no call. For Ethan's birthdays, however, they give it their best. My parents arranged a huge celebration for his 16th birthday last year. They hired a bouncy house, invited all of his friends and relatives, and even hired a magician or other entertainer. They had the entire event catered, and the house was decked out like the Super Bowl of birthdays. It was absurd. I wasn't even invited, either. Yes, you read correctly. Even my own brother's birthday party did not extend an invitation to me. I only learned about it the day before, and when I brought it up to my parents, they dismissed it, claiming that I was too busy with school to want to attend. To be honest, I tried to forget the entire incident by going out with my friends that day, but even as we spent time together, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I wasn't welcome in my own family. When my birthday arrived this year, it was the true kicker. Maybe, just maybe, they would at least recognize it, but I didn't anticipate anything. I've learned not to. Nothing, once more. I spent the day with my college pals. Although it was enjoyable, the tiny celebration they organized for me in the dorms is not the same. Even if it's only a little, your family should enjoy your birthday with you. Every time Ethan turned 10, my parents transformed the house into a ludicrous pirate adventure theme, complete with costumes and treasure hunts, reminding me of what I was missing. In the meantime, we enjoyed pizza for my 10th birthday. That was it, and I considered myself fortunate to receive that. The continual reminder that I'm not the favorite, that I never will be, is what hurts the most, not the presents or the parties. I've made a concerted effort to be a good son by doing all they asked of me, staying out of trouble, and getting good grades. However, none of that was important. Ethan has always been charming. He's gregarious, athletic, and everything I'm not, and my folks loved it. I recall being ecstatic to have a younger sibling when he was born. I assumed we would play video games together, be great friends, and hang around like the brothers in movies. However, I quickly discovered that Ethan also had no interest in me. He had all he could possibly want: his friends, his sports. I was merely present. I was the forgotten child, the fallback option. I became resentful of him as we grew older together. At first, I don't think it was his fault, but he began to recognize his authority in the view of my parents. He could do no wrong. Guess who would be held accountable if we got into a fight? Me, always me. My parents would simply laugh it off if he made a mistake, or they could even accuse me of not doing enough to assist him. I was always the villain, regardless of what he did. I recall Ethan lying about smashing the TV once. The TV was knocked off its stand as he and his friend were roughhousing. The object was all but broken. Ethan pointed directly at me when my parents got home and said I was the one who had knocked it over, even if I wasn't at home. You know what? They took him seriously. They confiscated my phone, grounded me for a month, and pretended that I was a criminal. I basically gave up at that moment. In an attempt to escape from home, I began to isolate myself more and spent most of my time in my room or at friends' houses. However, Each time I entered the house, it seemed like I was entering a never-ending reminder that I was unimportant. Ethan's room was filled with posters of his favorite sports teams and all the newest technology, whereas mine was tiny and claustrophobic. He seemed to have his own little empire, and I was just a nobody in the background. I will always remember my 18th birthday. I hoped that since I was growing up, they would do something special for me. However, no. It was just another day. When I came downstairs that morning, Ethan was playing on his new Xbox, my dad was reading the paper, and my mom was working in the kitchen. No one spoke, not even a happy birthday card or present. I seemed to be non-existent. I came to the realization that nothing would ever change at that point. Ethan had prevailed. He had stolen everything from me, including my parents' love and care. What's the worst part? Most likely, he was unaware that he was doing it. Or perhaps he did, but he didn't give a damn. In any case, it wasn't just the typical sibling rivalry that made me loathe him. I'm referring to hate, the kind that keeps you up at night contemplating how much better your life would be without them. I realize it seems drastic, but that's my situation. Anger flares up inside of me every time I see Ethan's face. I no longer find it bearable to be in this family or to be near him. My parents always dismiss my attempts to express my feelings to them, claiming that I'm being theatrical or that I ought to treat Ethan with more consideration. However, why should I? When someone has taken everything from me, why should I be kind to them? I feel as though I'm caught in a never-ending circle of hatred and animosity, and the worst part is that I have no idea how to escape it. All I want is for myself to feel important and valuable. However, I will always be the second best in this family. From here, I have no idea where to go. Perhaps I should break things off with them. Perhaps I should go up to Ethan and tell him how much he has wounded me. Or perhaps I should just continue to separate myself from them and make an effort to live my life without them. I'm not sure. I just know that I can't continue to live this way, no more. My last post was a few years ago, and to be honest, I never imagined that I would return. I believed that the family trouble was behind me forever. However, the nightmare I thought I had escaped has suddenly become worse than I could have ever imagined. Since life has a tendency of throwing curveballs, this is a lengthy and convoluted narrative, so buckle up. I took the necessary action after my last post. I cut off contact with my parents. How could I not? I was being tormented by the ongoing disregard and the obvious partiality shown to my younger brother, Ethan. I decided to avoid making too much contact. As quickly as possible, I left my parents' house and moved in with a few college pals. To be honest, I felt as though a burden had been removed. Of course, though, I still had to earn a living. Since I've always been skilled in graphic design, I began working as a freelancer on Fiverr. Initially, it was only to cover the expenses, but as I gained more customers and established a reputation, it grew into something more. I put in a lot of work, whether it was on the weekends or late at night. I refused to let my achievement be defined by how my family treated me. Then I met her, Sophia, and it was incredible. She was intelligent, ambitious, and kind, everything I could have hoped for in a spouse. We clicked right away because she worked as a freelancer, managing social media for small businesses. We began working together on projects, supporting one another's professional development. She was the first person, to be honest, who gave me the feeling that I wasn't invisible. She did see me, you know? And since she truly cared about me, she loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for her or out of duty. Our dreams grew as our jobs flourished. After a year or so of dating, we moved in together, and things continued to improve. Our crazy plan was to combine our savings and purchase a home, but we didn't want just any house. We wanted something unique. We searched for months before locating the ideal location, a huge, 3-story suburban home. Our combined income allowed us to make it work, even though it was more than we ever imagined we could afford. We were overjoyed. This was something we created together, our dream. 3 days after we completed the transaction, we were formally homeowners. The real nightmare began at that point. My mother called me 3 days after we moved in. I wasn't even willing to pick up at first. Since I moved out, we hadn't spoken much, and the few times we had spoken, it had either been awkward or resulted in a fight. However, I responded for some reason. As if nothing had happened, she chirped, "Hey, honey, we're in town and thought we'd stop by to see the new house." I ought to have been more aware. I should have sensed that something wasn't right. I told her they could come over, though, even though I should have known better. I reasoned that it would be better to end the visit than to continue avoiding them. My dad, Ethan, and a woman I had never met before arrived at our front door a few hours later. This is where things start to become extremely strange. My younger brother, Ethan, the beloved and golden child, wasn't by himself. The female companion, it turns out, was Chloe, his fiancée. She was also expecting a child. Yes, you read correctly. Ethan would soon become a father. Nobody had bothered to inform me of my brother's engagement or the impending birth of a child. My first warning sign was that my father began using passive-aggressive language before he had even entered. "Whoa, you bought this house. Surprised you could afford something like this," he replied sarcastically, as if he had been demeaning me all along. However, I dismissed it. I didn't want to get into an argument, not quite yet. The discomfort increased after they were inside. Sophia sensed that something was wrong when my mom tried to strike up a conversation with her. She kept looking at me as if to ask, "What's going on?" At the same time, Chloe was pacing the house as if she owned it, while my dad and Ethan were whispering to each other. Then, suddenly, my father revealed shocking information. As patronizing as ever, he began, "We've been thinking it would make sense for Ethan and Chloe to move in here, since they are starting a family and will need space for the baby." Not quite digesting what he had just said, I just gazed at him. "What? This house is much too large for you and Sophia alone," my father went on, utterly disregarding my surprise. "A location like this would be very beneficial for Ethan and Chloe as they raise their child. You don't need all this space." What I was hearing was unbelievable. I felt as though my own house was being gaslit. "Are you kidding me?" After giving me a direct look, my dad said something that made my blood boil. "No, we're serious. It's time for you to let your brother have what he needs and move aside. After all, he is establishing his own family, and family comes first. You can find a smaller space with Sophia. This house will work better for them." I went crazy. All of the years of animosity, disregard, and partiality suddenly surfaced. "Are you for real right now? This home belongs to us. This place is in our names. Sophia and I purchased it. You can't simply walk in here and declare Ethan should have it just because he knocked someone up." Ethan, appearing smug, tried to add something. "Dude, you don't really need all this room. Come on, we are parents." "You are not," I yelled. "That's not the point. The idea is that just because you believe you have a right to something doesn't mean you can just take it. I'm tired of being ignored for you, even though I've done it my entire life." My dad became really combative at that point. In an attempt to frighten me, he stood up and puffed out his chest. "Watch what you say, boy. You should be appreciative that we're asking rather than merely telling you to give up the keys. Whether you like it or not, Ethan will own this house." I became enraged. I'm not sure what got to me, but I lost it. I shoved him back into the wall as I pounced at him. "Please leave my house immediately." I let out a yell. I was unable to stop. Sophia was yelling at us to stop. Anger that had been bottled up for years was erupting. After my dad pushed me back, we got into a full-on brawl, hurling punches and cursing at one another. Chloe stood in the corner, frantically calling her phone, while my mom and Ethan screamed. We didn't ultimately stop until the police arrived. I suppose that when things got out of control, Chloe had phoned them. They took my dad and I apart, put us in handcuffs, and dragged us to the station. It was unbelievable to me that this was my reality. As I sat in the holding cell, I was sitting in jail because my own father had attempted to take my house from my brother. A few hours later, Sophia came to my rescue, but the damage was already done. My family was officially irreparably damaged. However, it didn't stop there. It grew worse. Oh dear. In his unending brilliance, my father chose to sue me for the house. In fact, he attempted to sue me, saying that Ethan and Chloe were more in need of the house than I was, and that I ought to give it to them. I was stunned by its blatant insolence. Thus, we appeared in court. I prepared for the battle of my life by hiring a lawyer and gathering all the required paperwork to prove that the house was in my name. The truth is, though, I had something different planned. I wasn't going to overlook the trail that years of emotional and psychological abuse had left behind. I collected information from acquaintances who had witnessed my parents' treatment of me over the years, including emails, texts, and even eyewitness accounts. I took everything to court. In addition to asserting that the house belonged to me, my attorney claimed that I had spent the majority of my youth being neglected and emotionally abused. I had had enough of being the submissive, quiet son. It was time to defend ourselves. Months passed throughout the court case. My dad did everything he could to paint me as the villain. He portrayed himself as a devoted father who only wanted to act in his family's best interests. Ethan and Chloe pretended to be the victims, saying that I was being self-centered for keeping the house and that they needed it for their child. However, none of it was successful. I felt as though a burden had been removed from my chest as the final verdict was rendered. In addition to finding in my favor, the judge mandated that my father compensate me for emotional and psychological abuse by awarding me $120,000. It was unbelievable to me. It felt like justice, as that someone had finally defended me for the first time in my life. I stopped communicating with Ethan and my parents following the court decision. The lies, the manipulation, and the unrelenting favoritism were all too much for me to handle. Having the house to ourselves at last allowed Sophia and I to begin rebuilding our lives. However, the wounds caused by everything that transpired will never completely heal. I still find it hard to comprehend how far my parents went to defraud me, even as I write this. Ethan was the golden child, and I was merely an afterthought, but I suppose that's simply the way things have always been. However, it is no longer the case. About 3 years have passed since my previous update, and I wish I could tell that everything has been going well. I believe that everything had finally calmed down after the chaos caused by my dad attempting to take my house. I believe that I had permanently moved on from the family drama. If I've learned anything, it's that no matter how hard I try to keep my distance from my family, they will always want to pull me back into their toxic mess. Before I get into the recent horror, let me just provide some context. However, it was my younger brother, Ethan, who lost it. I suppose I should have anticipated it. My parents had always gone out of their way to satisfy Ethan, who was known as the golden child. He never accepted accountability for anything in his life, and he always placed the blame for his errors on someone else. The financial status of my parents suffered when the court decided in my favor and mandated that my dad pay me $120,000. They weren't in financial distress or anything, but their standard of living had decreased. Being the pampered brat that he is, Ethan was unable to cope, I suppose. That was the beginning of the end for him because he didn't get the house he believed he was entitled to, and his father had to pay a hefty sum of money. A few months after the court case, his fiancée, Chloe, broke up with him. She took the kid and returned to living with her parents, based on rumors I heard. Although I never heard the whole story, I'm positive that Ethan's inability to cope with the strain was the reason. I can only assume he believed that I was to blame for everything, including my dad's legal defeat, their financial difficulties, and Chloe's departure from him. Things took a very bad turn at that point. About a month has passed since my wedding. As we continued to adjust to our new life together, Sophia and I were relishing the tranquility that came with finally escaping the toxic hold of my family. I made the decision to take a stroll around the neighborhood one afternoon. Sometimes, I like to take a stroll around the peaceful streets and breathe in the fresh air to decompress. At least, it should have been a typical day. I spotted Ethan halfway down the block. He was standing on the street corner, looking at me with a look of unadulterated anger in his eyes. Uncertain if I was seeing things, I froze for a moment. I didn't know why he was in my area. We hadn't spoken in years. Ethan, confused, I called out. What the hell are you doing here? He charged at me before I could even comprehend what was happening. He was also not without anything. He was holding an iron rod that looked like it had been torn off a building site. What the Ethan? I yelled, attempting to retreat, but he moved too quickly. With all of his strength, he swung the rod, and before I could react, it struck my side. Instantaneously, the pain shot through my ribs like a flame. Gasping for air, I sat down, but Ethan wasn't finished. He lowered the rod once more, aiming for my legs this time. When it struck my left shin, I heard the horrible snap and fell hard, landing on the sidewalk. You ruined my life. Ethan's voice cracked with rage as he screamed. You are solely to blame. Everything is ruined because of you, including the fact that Dad went bankrupt and Chloe left me. To protect myself, I attempted to stand up, but my body refused to obey. Every nerve in my body felt like it was on fire from the excruciating pain. Ethan raised the iron rod once more as he stood over me, his face contorted in rage. Knowing what was going to happen, I prepared myself, but I was immobile. I had no power at all. My right arm took the following blow, and I felt the force cause my bone to break. Time seemed to slow down. The world around me grew hazy and muffled, like if I were underwater, and my vision went blurry. I lay there waiting for the next strike, wondering if this was how it was going to end, unable to even scream. I'm not sure how long the attack went on, but eventually, I heard voices, far away at first, then getting louder. I could hear footsteps running toward me and shouting. I was too far gone to comprehend what was happening. When I saw someone take Ethan and pull him away from me, I lost consciousness. I was in the hospital when I woke up. Sophia was seated by my bedside, her eyes puffy and red from sobbing, her face pale. My throat was dry, and every muscle in my body ached as I tried to speak. Sophia squeezed my hand and said, "You're okay. You'll be all right." I wasn't feeling well. My right arm, left leg, and ribs were all fractured. I was fortunate to be alive, the doctor stated. Ethan might have murdered me if the spectators hadn't stepped in at the right moment to stop him. The police had to be called. As I lay bleeding on the sidewalk, Ethan was immediately hauled into custody and placed in handcuffs. The next few days were a haze as my body gradually started to mend. The painkillers kept me sedated, and I was in and out of consciousness. Sophia refused to leave my side and remained by my side the whole time. She took care of everything, including hiring a lawyer to handle the impending court case, handling the insurance, and handling the police reports. A trial was indeed imminent. Ethan was facing severe jail time due to the severity of my injuries after being charged with assault with a deadly weapon. Sophia gave me the specifics when I was at last clear enough to comprehend what was going on. Since Chloe had left him, Ethan had gone absolutely insane. He fell into a severe despair, yet he blamed me for his shortcomings, rather than owning up to his own shortcomings. The police report states that Ethan admitted to them that he had been plotting the attack for hours, waiting outside my residence. He brought the iron rod he had stolen from a building site close to his flat. The worst part, though? He had absolutely no regrets about it. He told the police that I had destroyed his life, that he deserved to punish me, and that he was only receiving justice for my actions. He genuinely thought that I was to blame for everything, including our dad's financial difficulties and his fiance's departure. I was in the hospital for weeks to heal from the fractures. Physical rehabilitation, innumerable tests, and the impending court case were all new forms of agony. Every day, I was unable to walk for about a month. And even after I was released from the hospital, I spent weeks on crutches and wearing a cast on my arm. According to the physicians, I might not fully recover my left leg's mobility for months, and even then, it might never return. A few months later, the trial got underway. Naturally, Ethan entered a not guilty plea. He believed that I was the one who drove him over the line, and that his actions were justifiable. His attorney attempted to claim that he was in the wrong frame of mind due to all that had transpired with our family, and that he had acted out of emotional anguish. However, the proof was incriminating. Several others who saw Ethan assaulting me were eyewitnesses, and they stepped in and contacted the police. The police report unequivocally demonstrated that Ethan had premeditated the attack, and the prosecution had medical papers outlining my injuries. There was no doubt that he had come to my house with the intention of hurting me. One of the most difficult things I have ever had to do is sit in that courtroom and watch my brother attempt to defend what he did to me. Throughout the trial, he didn't even glance at me. It seemed as though he no longer recognized me. The worst part, though, it was my parents, not me, who came to support him. They nodded as if they agreed with every word he said while they sat on his side of the courtroom and listened to him spew lies about how I had ruined his life. It felt like being stabbed in the stomach. They still selected him despite everything they had done to me and everything he had done to me. They continued to think that he was the victim in this whole situation. The decision was obvious from the beginning of the trial, which lasted for a few weeks. Ethan received a 5-year prison sentence after being convicted guilty of aggravated assault. After 3, he will be eligible for parole. But to be honest, I don't give a damn anymore. I've come to terms with the idea that I no longer have a family, not a biological one anyhow. Throughout everything, Sophia has been my pillar of support. She is the one person who has supported me through difficult times without faltering. Moving on and achieving both physical and mental healing have been our main priorities. I've been attending therapy in an attempt to handle the trauma of what transpired, but it's taking a while. I feel like I'm finally making progress on certain days, although some days are better than others. On other days, I feel like a shattered, empty replica of the person I used to be, and I can't even look in the mirror. I will never allow my family to harm me again, though. I'm finished with them altogether. Thank you for reading if you have gotten this far. For now, I'm just attempting to live each day as it comes, without knowing what the future will bring. Although there will never be a perfect life, at least I now know who I can trust, and that is more valuable than any family could ever be. My parents perpetrated the most outrageous prank yet, right when I thought I had heard the last of them. About 6 months had passed since Ethan's sentencing. At last, things were beginning to return to normal for Sophia and me. We were even discussing creating a family of our own. The nightmares had subsided, and I was improving in therapy. Until last week, things were gradually improving. I was scheduled to have lunch with Sophia at a cafe close to her workplace. We did it frequently as a way to spend time together and break up the workday. However, she failed to appear that day. I waited at first, thinking perhaps she was simply running late. I called her phone and texted her, but to no avail. My heart began to race. Even if she's only saying she stopped in traffic, Sophia always responds and is never late. A feeling of icy fear crept over me, as if something terrible had happened. When I called her office, they informed me that she had left on schedule. Panic struck. I started driving around the neighborhood, since I had no idea what to do, thinking maybe she had been in an accident or her phone had died. I received a call from a block number at that point. I initially believed it to be a hoax, but I felt compelled to respond. The next thing I heard chilled my blood, therefore I'm glad I did. My mother's voice, which was simultaneously chilly and sickly sweet, said over the phone, "Your wife is with us. We're taking her to a safe place where you can't harm her anymore." My heart stopped beating. "What the?" I yelled, nearly causing the car to crash. "What on earth are you discussing? Where is Sophia? What did you do?" My dad's voice interrupted. "She's with us now. You have twisted her against her family and poisoned her mind. We're acting in her best interests. We're bringing her away from you to a place where she can think." What I was hearing was unbelievable. My wife had been abducted by my own parents. In their perverted story, they honestly thought I was a villain, and now they were stealing Sophia, my true love, in the hopes of rescuing her from me. "I swear to God," I told them, "I'm calling the police if you don't bring her back right now." I'm not sure how I was able to remain composed. My father genuinely chuckled. "Do you believe that we fear the police? You are not her family. We are. She would prefer not to have you around." Never in my life had I been so blindly angry. I quickly contacted the police after hanging up. I was going crazy while I waited for them to track down the call. I kept thinking about what they were doing to her and where they might take her. It seemed like an eternity as the hours went by. At long last, the police called me. Sophia had been located. She had been brought to a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of town by my parents. They were trying to deprogram her by keeping her isolated in a room and telling her to leave me and return to the family. Being the fierce woman that she is, Sophia had already escaped the room and fled to the lobby of the motel, where she pleaded with the clerk to call the police. She was safe when the police arrived, and my parents were immediately taken into custody. They face many charges, including wrongful imprisonment and kidnapping. I genuinely don't care what will happen to them now, but I don't know. Personally, I don't think they're alive to me anymore. It doesn't matter what false beliefs they may have had or what excuse they may have given themselves for their behavior. I will never forgive them for attempting to take away the one person who is extremely important to me. The only thing that matters is that Sophia is safe now. However, I will always remember my mother's voice when she stated that they were acting for her own good. They seemed to be living in another reality where I was the antagonist and they were the heroes. I have no idea what the future will bring, but I know that I will never again be with them. It's time to at last genuinely move on. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.